I'm Faith. You all know me except for one individual. And so I'm an employee of the city, but my role, just like our former sustainability coordinator, is jointly funded, privately and publicly funded. And so I have been funded through a process of coordinating 54 donors in the community, and then also the university and the city all pitched in to fund this position for 3 years. I've had it for the last year and a half. 1 year was occupied by our wonderful Rachel Hillier, who is now the assistant director at FIDA or Grow Fairfield. And I have 8 more months, 7 more months that I know to move forward some of these actions. For the last year and a half, I've been working with 25 to 30 volunteers. We call ourselves the RAC, the Resilient Action Committee. And we've been working on a resiliency plan. Resilient Action Plan or Resiliency Action Plan. So in 2023, these 30 members came together in March of 2023. This is before my time, but they all committed to this process. And so many of these individuals, most of these individuals are professionals in their field. They are holding so much domain knowledge. I'll tell you what areas we're focusing on in just a moment. But they've been sitting through this process of working out what it means to be resilient in Fairfield. And we've learned a lot over the last year and a half. So those 30 individuals broke themselves out, self-selected into 6 subcommittees. So we have land use, waste management, private land stewardship, buildings and energy, enterprise solutions and community connections, and foodways. Our wonderful Joe Ledger serves on 2 of those, land use and private land stewardship. Each of the subcommittees went through this process early on of mind mapping to determine what are the primary issues in our community. So we went through this process. It's a 9-step process. Process 0 was that brainstorming and mind mapping. So figuring out what are the issues under that subcommittee, under that sub-theme, what are the issues in our community that we can focus on. Came up with very long lists. You can see an example of what that might look like here. You know, a mind map of just like, oh boy, this is land use's mind map. And so there are so many topics that we could have focused on, but we had to narrow it down. This plan is meant to be living. It will evolve, but we needed to know what is the highest priority right now? What do we need to focus on now? So we went through a prioritization process where they selected their chosen sub-themes by seeing, you know, what kind of resources are we going to need to make sure that this is happening? How many of our community are impacted by it? What's the technical support for this issue? You know, how realistic is it that we can bring this forward? So after going through a prioritization, we did an early stage characterization. So we kind of mapped what that problem looks like. That's also with the problem trees, figuring out from the root, where's that problem stemming? And what are the stages of solving the problem? Then we went through step 4, problem statements. Where do you live? Step 4. We went through writing problem statements. That was probably the longest stage. I don't know if you've had to write problem statements, but they're pretty complex, you know, because you have all of these categories that you have to satisfy when you're trying to figure out what's the real issue. And so we wrote problem statements. And then we also at the same time determined what would resiliency look like if we were to solve that problem? What's the ideal? So again, we are siloed groups. We're groups of 4, 5, 6 individuals, these subcommittees. Each subcommittee has a handful of individuals. I get to be a part of all of them, so I just named myself as a member of every subcommittee. You need someone who's got a view of the entire landscape. And so that was my role, to facilitate the processes and track all the data, track the process. But yes, it's taken quite a while to get through. It's been a year and a half since we started this process to get through the 9 steps. It's really going to be 10 or 11 steps when we actually count them all up. But what do the deliverables look like at the moment? So right now, we've just got to the point where we've summarized the work for each of those sub-themes into a outline of a resiliency plan section for each of the sub-themes. So for buildings and energy, we're focusing on quality housing, we're focusing on non-residential buildings, and we're focusing on trades and maintenance tradespeople, or construction and maintenance tradespeople. In waste management, originally we had said, okay, there's organic waste, there's recycling, there's solid waste, and then also we have this awareness that our wastewater is something we should focus on. Because we are environmentally focused individuals, you know, we're concerned, you know. So we went through the process, you know, we realized around step 5, which is where we start writing those SMART objectives. What are the milestones to solve the issue? Creating a SMART objective. We realized that actually, let's just focus on solid waste because that solves everything. That'll solve organic waste, that'll solve recycling, and that'll solve the solid waste. And then let's also focus on the wastewater, but let's do it as an educational campaign. Because if you've never toured our wastewater treatment plant, it was updated, rebuilt in, it's been about 12 years, 10, 12 years ago. We have a really awesome wastewater treatment plant. If you've never scheduled a tour, it's something you can do. And I would suggest it, but I would go as a group because they're busy. They do like to give tours. But it is a really amazing wastewater treatment plant. It's all biological. We don't use chemicals. So we use biology to reduce nutrients. We use biology to break down the solids and separate them out. We use UV to deal with the bacterial colony forming microbes. It's a really amazing plant. And we have, you know, they have a really high-tech lab. And they actually do some of the testing for other communities in our county and adjacent counties. So pretty cool. It's oversized, actually, our wastewater treatment plant. We, as a community, use less water than typical communities. So that means those big trunk lines, they have to go through and clean a lot in order to get, you know, so things don't settle out. More water going down into those trunk lines would be great, but it's a great plant. So it's really an education that we want to inform the community at large. 1, how awesome our wastewater treatment plant is, and 2, how to be in service to it versus getting in the way of its function. Because it's biological, we can do that. We can get in the way. Foodways, we're going to focus on building a robust community food system, and we're going to focus on table food farm viability models, the resiliency of table food farming. We really want to see more farmers where, you know, Iowa is an amazing agricultural state. Jefferson County, just like most counties in Iowa, you know, a majority of our acreage is in the business of agriculture, but we do need more table food farmers so we don't have to import over 90% of our food. It would be really lovely to be able to consume the potential high quality food that we can grow here. Our private land stewardship group is focused on urban water quality. So this is surface water versus our wastewater. So surface water, urban water quality, focusing on agricultural conservation practices, and we're focusing on biodiversity, conservation practices for habitat and private land stewardship. In enterprise solutions and community connections, we're focusing on some really big issues. This is kind of like the basic needs subcommittee. We really had to scale it back, but we focused on building a thriving economy, coordinating our volunteer organizations because we have so many amazing volunteer organizations. How can we be in service to them, and how can we keep them populated and well communicated about? And then centralized and coordinated communication. I'm sure everyone is aware that currently it's kind of complicated to stay informed around all of the resources, opportunities, events. How do we stay informed, especially when we're losing our print media and our local radio stations? The analog communication realm is kind of shrinking, and the digital is expanding, but it's very decentralized, which is not a bad thing, but if we need to curate more specifically for our community to keep our community cohesive, informed, and engaged. And then also land use. Land use is focusing on undeveloped spaces It used to be undeveloped spaces and green spaces, but they're the same thing, undeveloped spaces. So we're focusing on undeveloped spaces, really wanting to make sure that we're figuring out how to, one, inventory, categorize, put a criteria matrix on best use for undeveloped spaces. So whether it's buildable, not buildable, does it have existing habitat, does it not have existing habitat? Is it in an area where green space is needed, or are we actually pretty flush? Because Fairfield's pretty flush with parks and green space. We don't necessarily need new pocket parks all over the place that someone would have to maintain, but in some areas we are deficient and we need more green space. We need industrial buffers. We need ways to preserve habitat for those that need it, wildlife corridors, things like that. But really, we also want to make sure that we are expanding our housing in our community, that we're expanding opportunity economically in our community. And so what does that look like? And also forward-thinking policy and planning was another sub-theme from the land use subcommittee. Around land use, but also in total forward-thinking policy and planning. So we've got that, the preliminary outline all mapped out for the 15 sub-themes. Wonderful, great. Now what's next? And so our roadmap right now is, in development. We are about to embark on the process of prioritizing for implementation. So this summer, sorry, this is really blurry, but basically, we're gonna, as subcommittees, we're gonna do 2 meetings. We're going to, and FYI, we've been meeting since, I've been involved since November of 2023, halfway through. We've been meeting as subcommittees every 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, these subcommittees meet, all 6 of them. And the total RAC meets once a month. Very committed. And these individuals are so ready for implementation. They're so ready to get projects going. But without this, the work that we've done before, how can you set that roadmap for what's next on those projects? How do we know what to prioritize? Just picking things out of a hat just because it's top of mind at the moment may not be the most sensible thing. How do we know we're moving forward with something that we can get stakeholders and buy-in, funding, technical resources? So we're going to sit down with each of the subcommittees in one of our meetings, and we're going to review. We've already reviewed it once, but we're going to review it in the perspective of being able to see the synergies. So the RAC before last, we went through and did an interactive process where everyone had the 15-page outline, and they started to look and see how did the other sub-themes, because we all meet as individual groups, so they don't have an in-depth awareness around each subcommittee's work. So we sat down and we figured out, where are the synergies between the subcommittees? Where are the actions in line, so that if waste management is focusing on solid waste, how can the work that Enterprise Solutions and Community Connection desires to do in centralized communication support that work? You can see that centralized communication is going to have a lot of synergy. We'll use that platform, that hub, to be able to put the educational information out, to get the information that we're wanting to share out into the community. So this is a prioritization matrix that Anne put together. It's pretty epic. I don't know if you know Ann Walton, but Ann Walton is a facilitator and organizer extraordinaire. And so we went through this mind mapping process where we were using sticky notes and drawing all over this whiteboard and, matching. She took that spaghetti mess and made this, which is really nice. So we're going to sit down and review our sub-themes for each of the subcommittees, just theirs, so that they can see, what do I really feel is the best project to orient towards right now over the summer. We're going to review our synchronicity or our synchronization matrix, and then we're going to select some projects. What are we going to put time and energy to over the summer and into the fall? And so we want to make sure that the projects that we choose are high interest, high benefit for the community, They show or could potentially show early results. And so we want that deliverable of being able to, one, feel it for ourselves, but two, for the community as well, so they can have buy-in. And then, we wanted to align with the other subcommittees. And we also want to make sure that we can, one, have the engagement, the stakeholders, and we need, if it needs funding, not all of them. We tried to be really practical. We've written grants and we know what the grant funding cycle is like at the moment. And so it's really better to try to ground this work very practically. And that's where we're going. We had at the beginning of the year, just kind of like, okay, luckily we were already leaning towards practicality, but we certainly, have that moment of like, okay, so maybe not federal funding for some of these projects, but some will. So that's where we're at right now. That's the update on the RAP. We are looking at our roadmap. We're plotting that movement forward. What are our next steps? What are the projects that we're going to achieve over the next 7 months, 8 months? Thanks.
You talk a little bit about your funding model and how these projects, as not only how you're paid for, but also how these projects, they don't come free. So what do you anticipate that process looking like?
It will depend, of course, for each. And so some projects and I went through how I was funded, how I'll be funded 26 or 27, we're not sure. We're not sure how that's going to happen. We know that the city is committed to do 1 more year of this process. The Sierra Club went through the process of acquiring funding for 3 years for this position. The city is committed to another year, and so the additional fundraising needs to happen. We'll be working on that over the next 8 months. We're also going to become a nonprofit so that we have a different vessel for receiving funds. We can, work with private foundations and things of that sort. And several of the first initial projects they will be low budget, and so we have opportunities in the community for funding some of those. And then we will seek, if we're looking for conservation work, then first we're going to use all the resources that already exist. We're not trying to be redundant. We're going to, if we're building an educational campaign around, agricultural conservation, all of this exists. We just need to make sure that our community understands that these resources are out there, have a platform for them to be able to access it, digitally and physically, and then get the word out. A lot of that can happen through volunteerism. Many of the projects are inventories, are making categorization and qualification matrix so that we know how to prioritize that particular sub-theme's focus. Some of the projects, if we're looking to build a robust community food system, we're going to need a food hub. We're going to need that Southeast Iowa Food Web to have some sort of aggregation space. We're going to need to have storage, cold storage. We're going to need to have CAP certified farmers. We're going to, there are things that will take a little bit longer to move through. And so that'll be an iterative process for funding, but we'll ground each project in the reality of where we are at the moment and where funding can come from. There are still grants out there. There's state grants that are accessible. For instance, right now for, homeowner occupied critical repair, things like that, the USDA has grants. And so we don't necessarily need to be the recipient of the funds. We just need to make sure that individuals know how to access the funds. Mm-hmm. We need to coordinate the process of acquiring that.
There's also some county funds, maybe
not.
Well,
partnerships like Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation,
yes.
you and Carol, I can see that.
Yeah, it's something that you didn't get a chance to see necessarily, but each one of these subcommittees has a in-depth step 7 worksheet, which is not listed here, where we go through the implementation, and technical support and funding avenues are listed for each sub-theme. And so we have, a long list of potentials for each of those sub-themes, and they're all different. Yeah.
Faith, how does private business fit into this? How many of these projects might have a component of the private sector?
I hadn't really sat down and considered that, but several. Waste management, solid waste is gonna have a lot. Non-residential buildings, a lot. Even undeveloped spaces, some of that will also be very much local business oriented, building a thriving, robust community food system, very much. So it will depend. Those partner seeking opportunities are coming soon. And so we are, again, wanting to narrow down our first projects so that we don't dilute the message or confuse the message. We would like to have, if we're going to bring out, and I think because we've already got so much energy behind building a robust community food system, Barbara Stone is on our subcommittee. I myself, Deanna Juleson, who is the former farmers market manager, and she's on the board, and also Jonathan Lawrence, who is the regional local food chain coordinator, value chain coordinator, and he also is the educational director for Iowa Farmers Union. So we've got a lot of domain knowledge in that group talking about food systems, a lot of connections, a lot of opportunity to find stakeholders and partners. We want to not tap those individuals until we have a project for them to plug into. And so we want to make sure that our subcommittees, one, have selected the projects that they have energy to start orienting towards, and then we want to tap those individuals. I'm a big not cart before horse person. Yeah. Any other questions?
Where do you guys meet, and how can new people best support this vision?
Yeah, you can email me for sure. And we meet, each subcommittee meets here at the CoLab. It depends on the schedule. The RAC itself is the second Thursday of every month, unless we want to reschedule that to another Thursday, because I would really love you to come, Joe. But we meet the second Thursday of every month in the trustee boardroom in Argero. So that's on campus. And that's at 8:30 in the morning. We just had our RAC this morning. So the larger group, which is a great opportunity to plug in and kind of get an overview of what's happening at the moment. And then if you are interested in particular subcommittees or projects, then that's how you could plug in as well. So I think, coming to a RAC meeting or two, and then emailing me and expressing your interest around certain topics, we could chat, and then just, making sure that you got plugged into the right subcommittee or project. Yeah.
So you said that your implementation is probably gonna be summer, fall?
First phase.
First
Yes.
phase.
First phase. I think
Right.
implementation, many of these milestones are out 5 years, 7 years. And so, yeah, we're not delusional. We know that it's going to take time, but there are foundational steps that we can go ahead and get in place in the next, 7 months.
Okay.
Yeah, we just want to make sure that we start putting those bricks in place. Mhm.
No questions. I just want to say that served on some committees, Faith is doing an excellent job.
Thanks, Joe. I really appreciate you attending. The information that you, share is so grounded because of your long history in your, lifetime of service, lifetime of farming, lifetime of being in Jefferson County. You just have so much knowledge and you're so grounded. So I really appreciate you being a part of it. Thank you.